and welcome to the channel. My name is Mark, and for today's video, I came up with the idea to react to something about the Urdu language. Comment on my last video reacting to the performance in the Coke Studio, Pakistan, I think. On that video, somebody commented that the Urdu language was the national language of Pakistan, and Hindi, which I thought was like the language that were used on that was used on the music Afrin. Hindi and Urdu are the same in speaking, but they're different in writing. So that's what the comment said. So I kind of like got curious how it works. So I found this other video that we will be reacting to on this video. That is so confusing. That we will be reacting today. This is Hindustani. Hindi and Urdu a single language? Question mark. So this is the video that we will be reacting. And I think I've heard of the word Hindustani before. So I think sometime when I was like studying in high school, this word was mentioned in one of our class. So I think I don't know. I don't have any idea. That was like way back, so I don't remember what the Hindustani language is. So let's go ahead and check this video out and learn more about the world.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Lang Focus channel. And
Lang Focus. Subscribe to the channel, Lang Focus channel.
Hindustani, or it's sometimes called Hindustani.
Mm.
There are countries with names like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan. Is there a country called Hindustan? Well,
no.
At certain points throughout history, the term Hindustan has been used to refer to all of India, but more generally it is used to refer to the area of the northern Indian subcontinent. The term Hindustan itself
is it like the Punjabi region? Is that what it is? Because I think no, not next to the Punjabi
you've never
region.
Heard of Hindustani before, but you've probably heard of Hindi and Urdu. Hindustani is a pluricentric language.
Pluricentric.
It's a single language that has two different standard varieties.
Ooh. So I'm just gonna clarify. Is it sort of like Hindustani is the language and Hindi and Urdu is like the dialect of that language? Is that what it is?
Even though Hindi and Urdu are referred to by different names, the spoken language is essentially the same, aside from some differences.
That's what the comment said.
Local regional vocabulary. The standard languages, however, which are used in writing and in formal situations, have more significant differences that reflect the cultural and religious identity of the speakers. But the development of these two standard languages is a recent phenomenon. For most of its history, Hindustani was a single language that was referred to by various different names. Hindustani is spoken as a native language by lots and lots of people. It depends on how you count it, but around 324 million people are native speakers of either Hindi or Urdu. There are about 258 million speakers of Hindi in India and about 52 million speakers of Urdu in India, and 14.7 million speakers of Urdu in Pakistan, and that's referring to native speakers. They also function.
Oh, okay. So Hindi is actually more or less common in India, and then Urdu is really a language of Pakistan. But in India, they also have Urdu somewhat. That's what I understand.
As lingua francas in very linguistically diverse regions. There are an additional 214 million second language speakers of Hindustani. This is perhaps most striking in Pakistan, where only 8% of the people speak Urdu as a native language, but over 94 million people speak it as a second language because it is widely learned as the language of education. There are also 120 million second language speakers of Hindi in India. So if we include both native speakers and second language speakers of both varieties of Hindustani, then there are about 538 million speakers of the language. Hindustani is a member of the Indo-Aryan branch of the Indo-European language family, and it's a descendant of the Saraceni Prakrit language, the language from which all modern Indo-Aryan languages descended from. And if we go back earlier than the Saraceni Prakrit language, it is a descendant of Sanskrit. Early forms of Hindustani developed between the 7th to 13th century CE, a time of heavy Islamic influence on the Indian subcontinent, due to conquests by Central Asian Turkic invaders. Then in the 13th century CE, the Delhi Sultanate began its rule and expanded this Islamic influence. Hindustani was the language of the common people around Delhi, while Persian became the official state language and language of the courts and the language of the
Oh,
elite.
okay.
The Delhi Sultanate was a Muslim kingdom which was ruled by successive Turkic and Afghan dynasties. These dynasties were Persianized, meaning that they looked up to and admired the Persian culture, so they brought the Persian language and its literary traditions with them to Hindustan. And they also spoke their own native languages, among them Turkic languages. They were followed by the Mughal Empire in 1526. They were another Persianized people of Turkic-Mongol descent, and like the Delhi Sultanate, they introduced Persian as the official language of the empire, the lingua franca of the elite people, and the prestigious literary language.
So basically, it's like Hindi is like the language of the locals, and then like Persian language is sort of the language of like the elite, like those who are rich. Was that like the case? I don't know. That's what I understand.
At the same time, Arabic was influential as a language of religion.
Mm-hmm.
During this time, Hindustani, which was known by different names such as Hindavi
Hindavi
and
and
Imavi, spread over much of northern Indian subcontinent as a lingua franca, although there were some local differences in vocabulary. The influence of Persian during these dynasties, as well as the status of Arabic as the language of religion, had an impact on the Hindustani language, but the degree of that impact depended on the local area and the culture and the religion of that community. For example, Muslim communities used more Arabic and Persian words and wrote in the Perso-Arabic script called Nastaliq, while Hindu communities used more Sanskrit words and wrote in the Devanagari script. In the 18th century,
I don't think that's easy to write, though. I don't know.
Hindustani based on the Karibali dialect of Delhi came to replace Persian as the language of the elite. And soon after, under British rule, it became the official language along with English. It was a variety of Hindustani containing Persian vocabulary. Another name for that language started to be used, which was Urdu. That name Urdu is a shortened form of the Persian phrase Zaban-e-Urdu, which means language of the camp. That is because the language was the lingua franca of the Mughal army and was used in their army camps.
Oh, so it's like Urdu was from the Persian.
Persianized variety of Hindustani was made the official language. Hindustani was considered a single language for all communities, with mere local variations. But when the Urdu variety,
or was derived from Persian, the Urdu language
by the British, this angered Hindus who thought that the language should be written in the Devanagari script, which is native to the subcontinent. This erupted into a major dispute over which script the language should be written in. Amid this dispute, the standard language of Hindustani began to diverge into two different languages, with Hindi drawing on Sanskrit for much of its formal vocabulary and purging the language of some of its Persian and Arabic vocabulary. Urdu went the other direction, purging the language of some of its Sanskrit vocabulary and expanding the amount of Persian and Arabic vocabulary. But this applies mainly to the standard written languages, with the spoken languages remaining almost completely intelligible. When a Hindi speaker and an Urdu speaker encounter each other, they have no problem communicating at all. There might be some different vocabulary that filters down from the literary language, and there might be some different vocabulary coming from local dialects, and there might be a slightly different accent, but generally they are not very different at all.
Okay, so in the Philippines, we have this language, or I would consider it as a language. So it's like the Bisaya language, which has like a different kind of dialects, which is like a Bisaya, the Cebuano Bisaya, the Bisaya in Mindanao, and then the Bisaya in different, like, in different provinces or in different islands. In which all of them are really like Bisaya, but there is really a difference in the words that were used. There are some words that would mean differently on another like Bisaya language from another like island or another province. So yeah, so I think that's the same concept, or that's the same thing as what he's saying about Hindi and Urdu being the language that is spoken almost like the same, though there are words, because Hindi and Urdu were, I think, based on what I understand from this video, were influenced differently. That's why there is a separation or a difference in some of the words in, like, pronunciations, accents. There is a difference because of those influences, as well as, the writing, as he mentioned. That's like the difference, really.
In fact, Bollywood movies are created in a kind of neutral Hindustani language that is usually neither Hindi nor Urdu. It's both.
That's
To do this,
why
they avoid
they
using
sound
literary
alike
vocabulary that is
when I
specific
hear
to the
them.
language, and they focus on the common vocabulary of the spoken languages. Let's look at a couple of sentences to see how similar the two languages are in casual speech and how they diverge in the more formal register. The first sentence means, I want to meet you.
I want to
in
meet you.
casual Urdu.
मैं आपसे मिलना चाहता हूँ.
मैं आपसे मिलना चाहता हूँ.
मैं आपसे मिलना चाहता हूँ.
So as you can see, the casual
That's
forms are quite
similar,
almost the same.
but
Now,
the
in literary,
pronunciation or accent
मैं आपसे मुलाकात का
ख्वाहिशमंद हूँ.
Now in literary Hindi.
मुझे आपसे मिलने की कामना है.
That's
In the
different.
literary forms, you can see that the vocabulary is quite different. The next sentence, I want to know how you are. In casual Urdu.
मैं आपका हाल जानना चाहता हूँ.
Now in casual Hindi.
It's the same.
मैं आपका हाल जानना चाहता हूँ.
In literary Urdu.
मुझे आपकी खैरियत नेक मतलूब है.
And now in literary Hindi.
मैं आपके हालात के बारे में निश्चित होना चाहता हूँ.
These examples basically show that
Hindi, casual and literary is more of like the same.
Literary Hindi have been crafted to reflect the different religious and literary traditions of their speakers. Of course, it would be a mistake to think that all Muslims on the Indian subcontinent speak Urdu and that all Hindus speak Hindi. But think of it like this. For people who specifically speak Hindustani, their religion basically determines which one they speak, Hindi or Urdu. It would also be a mistake to think that Urdu is the Pakistani language while Hindi is the Indian language. Urdu is the official language of Pakistan along with English, but in fact only 8% of the population are native speakers of Urdu, as I said before. Numerous other languages are spoken in Pakistan.
Punjabi.
The most widely spoken one is actually Punjabi, but Urdu is the lingua franca and virtually everybody learns it. In India, Hindi and English are the official languages at the national level, but each state is free to choose its own official languages too. There are
Same in the Philippines.
recognized official languages.
We have like 180 plus.
That includes Urdu.
18, 80, I don't know. I forgot.
In Pakistan, it's also an official language in 8 states in India, including the Delhi capital region. It is spoken by 51.5 million native speakers in India, and that's 3.5 times greater than the number of Urdu native speakers in Pakistan. So how hard is it to learn Hindustani, either Hindi or Urdu? Well, if you're a speaker of an Indo-European language, then you already speak a language that's related to Hindustani. So most of the grammatical concepts will be familiar to you, but there will also be some challenging differences as well. If we look back at our sentence from before, in English it translates as something like,
You may want.
English is an SVO language, while Hindustani is generally
SOV.
Object
verb.
And the verb goes at the end of the clause. You will also notice that meet comes before want. So the auxiliary verb, or the helping verb, comes
after the main verb.
At the very end of the clause or sentence. In Hindi, there are also feminine and masculine nouns, as well as 3 noun cases. But these 3 noun cases seem significantly simpler than some other languages that you may have encountered. Hungarian. One of the hardest things about learning Hindi or Urdu just might be that so many people on the Indian subcontinent are fluent in English, so it might be hard to get them to speak any other language than English with you, especially highly educated people. But if you spend time with the common people that you meet every day, then you'll have plenty of chances to practice. Speaking about Hindi and Urdu can be confusing because they used to be considered
one language.
And now, in terms of spoken communication, they are still essentially one language. Whether someone speaks Hindi or whether they speak Urdu depends more on their cultural and religious identity. Urdu speakers identify with Islamic and Persian heritage and its literary tradition, while Hindi speakers identify with
Sanskrit
and Hindu religion and its literary tradition. They speak the same language, but on top of that spoken language, each group has adopted a formal literary tradition that emphasizes its preferred cultural and religious identity. As a learner of the language, assuming that you want to converse and communicate with people, then learning either variety will give you access to the other one.
Because it's basically the same.
Million people. And with a diaspora all over the world, even outside of the subcontinent, you will have countless opportunities to practice and make new connections using the Hindustani language. And that brings us to the end of this video. Speakers of Hindi or Urdu, we'd like to hear your comments down below.
Yeah, like I want to know.
With communicating with people who speak the other variety of Hindustani. Is it the same language to you? How much difference is there? How much similarity is there? Let us know in the comments.
Alright guys, so that's Hindustani, Hindi, and Urdu, a single language video. And now I understand why I think about Hindi when I hear the song Afrin Afrin. Because basically Hindi and Urdu kind of sound the same when it is spoken. It's just that when it is written, there's gonna be really a difference on them because they are separate language in that case, Hindi and Urdu. But when you hear them, they kind of sound the same, depending as well on the location or where you are at, because there are different pronunciations, accents. So that would also, I think, matter. But in general sense, I think that's the reason why I think of the song Afrin Afrin as a song in Hindi. So yeah, so I really want to learn more because I'm really interested with regards to Pakistan, India, those sort of region. I'm really interested in the area, given that I'm watching this video. So yeah, I think that's it for this reaction. If you want to share with me anything that you want me to know regarding Hindi, Urdu, or the Hindustani language, feel free to drop them on the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do so. Your subscription will really help me a lot. Click or follow me on my social media as well. That's kingmrklyn on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. Thanks again for watching. Hangtod sa sunod natong panagkita, amping lang kanunay.